Welcome to the Professional Muslim Women Podcast, a place for working Muslim women to share their stories, struggles, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way in pursuit of their careers. I'm Dr. Kali Hussein.
And I'm Dr. Rahma Mohamed. And in this podcast, we bring inspirational, trailblazing, successful, and fulfilled professional Muslim women to you.
Get ready to be inspired and learn how you can forge your own path as well.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Rahma Mohamed, and today my guest is the wonderful Rahma Mohamed. Rahma's story starts in Hargeisa, Somali, where she was born and raised. Shortly before the Civil War broke out, her family emigrated to Canada. In Quebec, she attended her first formal school in French and became fluent in both English and French. She became the first person in her family to graduate university. She later went on to pursue a study in international business, but after 2 years, she realized it wasn't for her. She then went into international development and globalization, and this was followed by provincial government and work in many departments such as human services, labor and immigration, and children's services. After becoming a mother, Rahma decided to set out to self-publish children's books to encourage youth to be proud of their uniqueness and celebrate diversity. Noticing a lack of diversity in the market for Muslim children's books and recollecting her own struggles of growing up as an immigrant, she became determined to offer books centering on characters that are Muslim and with African roots. She released her first picture book, Muhimma's Quest, in 2017, and then her second book, Little Brother for Sale, was released in the summer of 2018. Rahma believes that children need to be able to see themselves in the books they read to enhance their self-confidence as well as bolster their sense of pride. She promotes this message by visiting schools internationally via Skype, and she has even given a TED Talk. Please help me welcome Rahma Mohamed.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, Rahma. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. It's so lovely to have you. How are you doing today?
Wa alaikum assalam, Hani. Thank you so much for inviting me and for having me on the podcast today. Alhamdulillah, I'm doing great.
I'm so excited to talk to you, Rahma, because I actually have been following you on Instagram for, I think, a year now. And I started out by Googling Somali authors because I was looking for children's books for my children, and representation matters. And I came across your Instagram and read your books and loved them, and my kids loved them. And so I really wanted to talk to you because this is almost like full circle. I want to know how you got to where you are today, how you got to this place of being a children's author and Instagram influencer. So let's start from the beginning. Go back with me a little bit. Are you ready for this?
Yes. I'm so ready for this.
We like to start at the very beginning. We kind of want to get into your head when you were a young woman, just kind of starting off on the path to professional development. Tell me, what was your early school and career experiences like?
Okay. So, in order to kind of maybe understand how I got to today, it's what shaped me is my family mainly because I'm the eldest of 7 kids. My family immigrated to Canada when I was 8 years old. We left just before the Civil War broke in Somalia. We actually crossed the border from the United States. I'm so grateful that my dad did not decide to stay in the US and actually cross the border to Canada. No offense to you guys that are there, but it just seems like a little bit better today. Like, I mean, in terms of the turmoil and the things that are happening in the US,
Don't worry, we
it's
agree
just
completely.
exactly. So, yeah, that's how we actually immigrated to Canada. So, I was very young. I was the eldest. And also the fact that when my parents came to Canada, they didn't have any other support, any other family member. No one else came from my family other than my two parents. So I did not grow up with any aunts, any uncles, any cousins, any other siblings, no one else. It was just us. So the type of dynamic and the type of decisions and the type of journey that I've had was very much shaped by that reality. So when I went to school, I was first to graduate from university for my family. my parents didn't have the opportunity to attend any high education. I think my dad has a high school diploma,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't have the opportunity to attend university anywhere.
Okay.
For me, that is significant. And when I decided to go to university, well, it was not a decision, it's a must because it was a triumph. Like it's an accomplishment of not just me, but my family, right? Of
Oh,
the
yeah.
sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
that they made, right? So at a very young age, I remember, and I know many people don't perhaps remember when they started reading, but I remember because when I came to Canada, I didn't speak French or English. It was just Somali, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I remember struggling to learn the language. And so the day that I began to read, like that for me was eye opening. Like I started reading all kinds of books. So literature was very important in my life. And if I had had and I say privilege because I didn't have that privilege just to go to university and do whatever I wanted because, I have this big sacrifice that I have to live up to.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had had the privilege to go to university and do what I wanted, it would have probably been to study literature,
Hmm.
study writing. But that's just an idea that my parents couldn't put into their minds. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not what success looked like. It's not
Mm-hmm.
what their sacrifice was for. They wanted
Mm-hmm.
something tangible. They wanted to quantify something. Like they wanted to say that their daughter was, a doctor. They wanted their daughter to be a lawyer. They wanted something that meant that they made it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I didn't have a choice. I went to university and I did international business. That's what I did because business was also something that was big, that was acceptable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did international business because business was acceptable, but also international because I wanted to travel the world. I did 2 years of international business. It didn't work out for me because I just didn't like it. And then I said to my parents, I have to study somewhere else because I didn't want to waste 2 years of credits, 2 years of studying. So what I did was is that I applied to all universities around, and there was one university that took me, and it was in international development. With that, I'm like, okay, well, I love working with people and I love to travel. With this degree, I'll be able to work at the United Nations and maybe go back home and do something. Okay, my parents was okay, okay, we can work with that. And so I did that. And then when I said to my mom, I'm like, okay, mom, I'm gonna go work with the UN now. I was like, yeah, no, that's not gonna work out for me. Once again, because I was the eldest. They, they were very protective of me. And they did not want me to travel on my own. So I didn't get to live that out. So with a degree and with dreams that were just never realized, with compromises made along the way, I just kind of decided to get, a job that would let them know that they had not made the sacrifice in vain. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, I think my journey and like, what I had to do was made through this reality of mine that I had to have a job or a path that looked like success in
Right.
their terms, not in my terms or other people's, but my decisions and my path was very much shaped by what my parents wanted. And my ultimate goal was always to make them happy because I knew how much they gave up. And as the eldest, I felt like the third parent. So I'm the one who understood the most of what they had given up. And I remembered the trauma of coming into this country. So I understood in a different way that the siblings that were after me, or even the ones that were born here, never understood. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like I tried to make the best out of what I was dealt with. And today, where I am, I feel like that journey and all of that experience shaped me into who I am. And I feel like God has opened up a new path for me. And I cannot look back and say, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have done this, or because I know why I didn't do those things. And, everything is a blessing and there's a reason behind everything. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I hear you. This story of the immigrant parents whose job was survival, and they are now so anxious for you not only to survive, but to be successful with their eyes, within the realm of what they know to be possible. So that's the conventional careers, pushing the kids to be a doctor, to be a lawyer. I totally get that. I'm sure I had some of that in my household as well.
Yes, but you
And,
did it.
you know, so it's like, okay, maybe they got me. Who knows, right? How much of
Yes, exactly.
my choice is mine? I understand that. And, I think the friction comes when your own desires or your fulfillment career wise is different or takes you to a different path. And it sounds like you're navigating that a little bit as you kind of weaved your way through the different career choices, which, by the way, you have in common with a lot of people, right? A lot of young people who need to try different things to figure out their path. Do you feel like as you went through the different steps that you were getting closer and closer to where you needed to be?
I think I always knew about myself that I liked helping people. So, in knowing that, the one thing that was really outside of the realms of my interest in anything was the international business. Business was not what I was passionate about. I had never considered doing that. And the calculus and all of that, it was just wasn't my strong suit. I remember in high school, I was always good at social sciences. I always excelled in like writing and literature and reading, and I really loved those subjects. I actually also tried to work in a nonprofit.
Mm.
One of the things that happened in the nonprofit, it was funny because I actually contemplated after I graduated, after I got married, I decided to do nonprofit. And I actually enrolled in school and tried to find a job in nonprofit because I was like, oh, that's still closely related to my degree and working for the United Nations and all of that. And then I got a job. But what happened is that none of the clients of the agency were too eager to divulge to me because I looked so young. And mind you, at this time, I'm 27, 28, but
Mm-hmm.
I looked a lot younger.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have these people, well, some people or some new refugees or things like that, I mean, I was very passionate. I didn't per se wanted to be a social worker, but I thought that if I worked in nonprofit and things like that, I could have a greater impact. But then I found a lot of resistance, some men that were in charge that weren't willing to give me chances. And when I did find a job, I just wasn't able to make the clients feel comfortable in divulging some of the things that they went through, whether through war or any
Mm-hmm.
other things like that. Then finally, someone said to me, it's because they think you're too young. I wasn't too young, but I looked too young. I don't know if that makes sense. So that was another avenue that didn't work out for me. So
Mhm.
then I ended up finding a job with the government here, the local government, like not the federal government, but the provincial government, where I worked in the field of social services.
Okay.
And I just felt that at that point, it was a stable job, it was a permanent position. I felt like my parents were finally at ease, that I had secured myself a position that was permanent. And I was in a field that I felt that I was giving back and I was working with people in the social work or social services type of position. So I always tried to kind of navigate that between my parents' wishes and my own. It wasn't always easy, but yeah, I finally settled in somewhere I feel like I'm useful, I'm giving back, and at the same time, my parents are proud of what I'm doing and where I am.
Yes, mashallah, that's great. So tell me, when you were a child, as often the only child of color in your class, what was that like? And did you face any religious or cultural barriers?
Absolutely. Because I was at an age where I remember coming to Canada, I came at a time where immigration wasn't as much as today, it wasn't known as much. And we immigrated in Quebec. At that time, I feel like the country wasn't aware of the immigration crises that were happening in the world, and they were ill prepared for that. So I distinctly remember coming to Canada and being placed. First of all, I had no language skills. I didn't know a word of English, French, anything. So I was placed in a class where they called like classe d'accueil. And I have still very traumatic memories from that time because just imagine being ripped from your parents that you used to see all the time, especially for me, like the only school that I would go to, because the war was like ramping up and there was a lot more restrictions coming up. Like I didn't go to a school all the time.
Okay.
So I was with my mother and my grandmother all the time. So now imagine coming to a land where you don't understand anything and being stuck with a teacher for most of the day
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know what's going on. Like the trauma of that still haunts me to
Mm-hmm.
today. And I still remember being the only one, only Black, only girl, Somali. It's just that province where we immigrated, there was no other Somalis. And thankfully, my parents recognized the damage that it was doing to us. And within 2 years, we had moved to Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, where there were a lot more Somalis at that time. Like a few years later, the war had started. People were immigrating more and more to Canada. And then there was a greater number of Somalis in Ottawa, and we were able to find a sense of community, a sense of belonging. I was able to see other people that looked like myself other than my siblings. So that made a big difference. So I still have like, some memories where the teacher tied me up to a chair because I just didn't know. I mean, I couldn't like imagine not even able to ask to go to the bathroom. And my parents didn't know the language either, right? So we were all like traumatized basically. And we were all in the same boat, just trying to survive, just trying to
Yeah.
keep afloat.
It was the days before cultural sensitivity, right? And inclusiveness and all of the things that we hope for our children now.
Oh, yeah, it was before Canada, advertised itself as being this multicultural nation. I mean, when I say they were ill prepared, they didn't know, but mass migration was also not a big thing at that time, right? And also, Quebec is the one that right now, the province of Quebec is the one that has the hijab ban. So they're not inclusive in of themselves.
Right.
So it's always been like that, and it's still to today, it's being like that. So at that time, I'm not surprised that that's how they dealt with immigrants. Other than like me, the only other Blacks that were there were the Asians. So they have a long history of in Quebec. But other than that, I was the only African girl in my class.
Mm.
So that in of itself is traumatizing.
Yes, it is. It totally is. And I almost feel like this next question is an obvious question, but how much does this inform your current work? Because now you are an advocate of diversity, of inclusion, of representation, diversity in children's literature. But tell me, how did you segue into becoming an author? And tell me about what informed that decision to do that, to get into that realm.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, literature and reading and writing has always been a passion of mine because when I began to read, I felt like a new world had opened up itself to me. And I'm fluent in both official languages of Canada. So I felt like I had almost like, I don't know, like for the little girl that didn't know a word of English or French, then to graduate in university with both official languages, I felt like victorious
What an
because
accomplishment,
yeah,
mashallah.
so that's what language gave me. So I
Mhm.
was always passionate about it. But it's not until I had my daughter that I started reading children's book. And you have to understand, I've never read a children's book.
Mhm.
So when I began to read, I phased that out at that age. If
Mhm.
you think that I was reading at 10, I'm sure children's books were used to teach me to read, but by then I was like moving on to chapter books and big books and things like
Mhm.
that. So I've never relished a children's book before until I had my daughter. And then I met this woman that said how she was so eager to have her child so that she can pass on her children's books to her that her mom used to read to her. And I
Wow.
thought, wow, what a legacy. I don't
Mhm.
have that. I've never written a children's book with my mom. So I began to become fascinated and we started reading and we always read. So that's when my passion for reading children's literature began. with my daughter. But then I began to see a lack of diversity in that sphere. Because if you want Muslim children's books, they're not geared towards diverse backgrounds. They're mainly either Pakistani looking characters or they're Arabs. I began to see that my daughter wasn't represented. And immediately, I think it kind of triggered me because I began to kind of see her not being represented and kind of feeling like the only one, like I felt. And I didn't like that because I had like a bookshelf full of Muslim children's book and then one diverse children's book. And then those ones were geared towards African American children.
Right.
And then the other bookshelf was Muslim children's book. And then none that kind of, or very few that kind of met the both criteria.
Right.
Islam is not one nation, it's not one kind of population. There's a diversity in all cultures and there's diversity in all religions. And I feel like we should represent the diversity. And as Black Muslims, we are facing double minority and double discrimination.
You're right.
So it's important for us to be represented. And those conversations and those imagery need to happen at a very young age because the world out there is set up to make them question themselves, make them hate themselves. So for me, it was very important that that literature exists.
Yeah.
So then I began to make dua, and all of a sudden, I will tell you, I remember still today because I wrote it in my journal, but September 14, 2016 is the day I got the inspiration for my first book. And immediately I went and I wrote it in my journal. And it took me a long time to write it, but I felt like it was kind of like an answer to the prayer I was making. Because for me, I had all of those ideas in me, but I didn't know that I was going to write those books. So once I got the inspiration, I said, why not? I should do this. So it wasn't kind of like, oh, wow, this is a problem. I need to solve it. How do I solve it? Let me think the story. It was more like, I got an inspiration. Why not do this? And I did it.
Wonderful.
So that's how it came about.
Wonderful. You know, I, as a mom, to share your passion for finding literature and media that is inclusive, where our children can look at themselves in it. You know, I've read some research in child psychology, and it's kind of scary to think about it because those of us who are children of immigrants or are immigrants ourselves, there is a difference between those of us who grew up in our homeland versus our children who are now growing up in their minority, right? And especially in societies such as ours, where people are put into a hierarchy, you know, based on ethnicity and all this other stuff, race and, you know, religious discrimination. And it really makes me, you know, I think about that and I think about how their young minds are being shaped constantly, you know, and I realized that I have to take such an active role to ensure that they're getting positive messages, that they see themselves. I think that being passive can be harmful, you know. And so my next question is, I know you're passionate in this arena. You did a TED Talks. I watched it. It was wonderful. What advice can you give parents of children who need to see themselves and who are like our kids? What advice do you give us in raising our children to gain self-confidence from a young, tender age?
That's such a good question. These are things that I'm figuring out along the way because learning something that you have not been taught is much harder than something that you have grown up with. So when I spoke about that woman that was passing on the children's books to her child, we didn't have that. We maybe didn't see our parents, you know, advocating for these type of things or looking for these type of things because they perhaps didn't have to, or it's just not something that was done back home. You have to think about the fact that, you know, back home we had people that look like us, people that spoke like us, and we didn't need to look for representation. Representation was there. We didn't need to validate ourselves. Everyone was like us, right? So now when we come into a country where we're not in the books, we're not on TV, we're not represented anywhere. When we go to work, and I'm speaking for myself, when I go to work, I'm always the only Black hijabi Muslim girl. Why?
Mm.
Is there no one else that's as talented, as qualified as me? Why am I getting all the questions that pertain to being Muslim, being Black,
Mhm.
being a Muslim woman, a hijab? Why? It's
Mhm.
because I'm always the only one. And it's not because there's no other people. It's the fact that when you get hired, like, I don't know. Well, there's a whole type of psychology about, the hiring process and all of that, right?
Yep.
And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with dismantling white supremacy and all of those things. But the fact is that I want parents to know that when your children succeed and all of these things, when they show up to work, they're most likely going to be the only one. And they're most likely going to be the one of few. Like there's only going to be few of them that are going to be perhaps Black, Muslim, encompasses so many things, and African and child of immigrant or second generation. So you need to be aware of that. There are things that you didn't grow up with that you now need to establish. The things that you perhaps your parents didn't have to worry about, now we have to worry about. We need to have conversations that we've never had with our parents. We need to do better because we know better. We're more educated. We're also of this generation, and our parents came with knowledge and things that pertain to their homeland, and they were trying to navigate this world, and they simply lacked in certain areas, but they did the best that they could, right?
Mhm.
So I
Right.
think for parents right now, for me, when I speak to parents of today, I let them know that your children are encountering things that you've encountered times 10. Certain things that we weren't faced with, now kids are dealing with technology, the kind of bullying that goes to extreme, police violence.
Mhm.
All of these things that weren't a problem for our generation are a problem for this generation. So I think it's very important for parents. When I speak right now, if we're speaking to Somali, parents, be mindful of that. Make sure that you are seeking out literature that's reinforcing positive imagery, positive messaging to your children, because they need that strong sense of identity for when they go outside. Yeah, I see it kind of like as a shield. If
Yeah.
they have strong self and a strong core, they'll be able to fend off all of these things that are coming at them from all corners, you
Yeah.
know?
I love
And
how you say that. Yeah. I see it as a shield too. That's exactly in my mind how I think of it, like
yeah,
armor. Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. So I just think that we need to do so much more work. Like now, like there's so many jokes out there that says parenting is so much harder in this generation, right? We have to worry about so much. But self-confidence and an identity is very important. We have kids that are kind of in between, and I felt like I was the in between type of one foot in my tradition and my homeland and one foot in this country. But now we're having kids, like my sisters are having kids, and they're second generation born here,
Hmm.
right? We've been here a long time.
Hmm.
So when we're having kids that are second and third generation here, we've been here.
Hmm.
We have to adapt to being here, but we also have to open our eyes to the realities that are here. We cannot go off of traditions and like things that, I think some of the youth are kind of lost because they haven't had this type of guidance.
Hmm.
And some people are just not aware or not, it's hard to recreate something you've never had or try to give someone else something you've never had,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that's the world we're living in. So I try to advocate for parents to do research on the impact of not having representation, not having these conversations, and not reinforcing these positive messages to their children, what kind of detriment that can do to them, and just try to kind of do better. That's pretty much what it is for me. And let me tell you, I make mistakes every day because, childhood psychology says that whatever you've experienced is what you will recreate.
Mm.
So I fight against myself every day as well. So I'm
Mhm.
not here telling anyone that I'm perfect and I'm a perfect parent and I got it together. It's a struggle.
Mhm.
I think that's part of the course.
It is. And it's an opportunity for educating, I think educating ourselves and then implementing these things that we learn. I love when I read, research because I feel like that is a good blueprint for me because like you said, you're parenting in a way that your parents didn't parent you. And so you
Mm.
can't fall back on what you learned traditionally. So the thing that's really helped me is reading a ton and trying to implement what I read. And it makes sense to me getting involved in my kids' school, ensuring that I know their teachers, counteracting any negative messages or bias that's based in bias that they get, and countering that with messages of love and self empowerment and self love and self confidence and a strong sense of identity and trying to foster that through their family
Mhm.
and their culture and being a role model and all these other things. It's definitely a more active role, I think, that we're playing than our parents did. But that's because we are facing more obstacles as parents than our parents did.
And I think also speaking about the struggles is very important. I have conversations with my daughter about things that I went through, and some people will think that she's too young, but she's not, because even though racism is not given words or it's felt, right? So
Yeah.
she's already felt excluded
Hmm.
and she's already felt like she was an outsider. So if she's already feeling that, I need to give those things words and she needs to understand that she might come across that. So I think that our parents tried to shelter us a lot. They didn't have the language to talk about certain things. And I think it's high time that we kind of go above and beyond those taboos and those things that were never addressed, because the real world is a scary place for kids that don't know. I always tell parents, like, if you are not willing to talk about these things, they're going to learn it from somewhere else and they're going to learn the wrong way. So I think it's important, like you said, show up at the school. And there's also psychology that says that teachers will treat your child differently if they know that they have an involved parent. There's also, I've worked in school where the majority of the parents were Somalis. And let me tell you, the administration was so racist in front of my face. And they would tell me, oh, they're not coming. Oh, they never come. And I had to be the voice to let them know, listen, these people are dealing with realities that you know nothing about. They are single mothers. They're working two jobs. They don't have the time to come to parent teacher meeting. There are realities that only a person of that community and of that background can give that administration that they know nothing about. They were judging their children off of the fact that these mothers were not showing up to parent teacher meeting. But let me tell you, as a mother now, if I had to work two jobs and I had multiple kids, I wouldn't be showing up either. So it's a privilege to be able to show up to these parent teacher meetings. But
Right.
you have to know that if you can, you should, because these teachers have your kids a lot longer than you have them. And if they're seeing them in a way that's not benefiting to your child is going to suffer. That was also very hard for me to have that job and to see that reality.
Mhm. All the more importance to really get involved in every aspect of your child's education at home and outside of the home. Wow. Rahma, thank you so much for these pearls of wisdom. I'm sure a lot of parents are listening, and I hope that they benefit from this conversation. I know I did. I benefited from listening to your TED Talk and watching your page. So thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so humbled to be part of this podcast, being featured among some incredible, accomplished women, Muslim women here. And the fact that I could be part of this, I'm so grateful. I really hope that we can continue to have these conversations so that we can continue to motivate one another. Because for me, to see all these accomplished women, it's so invigorating to me and it motivates me to a next level, right? So
Mhm.
for that to happen and then for my daughter to hear about this, it's just great. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. it's having amazing, amazing consequences out there. It's making such a huge difference. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, dear sis. Oh, I love getting that kind of feedback. That's exactly what our aim is, that these episodes live on and young women can listen. Thank you so much, Rahma.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into the Professional Muslim Women Podcast, the place for Muslim women to inspire and be inspired.
Please join us on our Facebook group, Professional Muslim Women, to continue the conversation and connect with Muslim women like you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and drop us a like or a review.
We look forward to hearing from you soon.